Hello everyone, I'm Nawat from Science Society Club and you are now listening to Science Society's first ever science podcast. In this podcast, we talk about the different aspects of science where it might not get covered in class, and that's the goal of our podcast. Today, joining me for our very first episode is our club president, Tanisha.
Hi everyone, I'm Tanisha and I'm the president of Science Society Club. We are really excited to present science podcasts to everyone because we're here kind of exploring a different side of science that maybe you guys might not have seen, that science is a part of this aspect, and it's actually a part of a lot of everyday aspects of us. So today our topic is going to be the multiverse.
Okay, so when we talk about the multiverse, obviously one of the more popular things that people think about is Marvel movies. For example, the Spider-Man, the new one, No Way Home. We've got the upcoming one, Doctor Strange, what is it called? Multiverse of Madness. And we've got, from a couple years ago, we had Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. So many Spider-Man movies have multiverse, but we'll stick with it. So, what is the multiverse?
Yeah, that is a very interesting question. What is this dynamic that is being explored in a lot of movies? So, if we look at the definition of the multiverse, it is kind of defined as a sort of a hypothetical collection of potentially diverse, observable universes. So, usually the multiverse concept, it's experimentally accessible by a connected community of observers, so for example like the human race. But the thing is, the multiverse, the hypothetical collection that I was talking about, it actually means that there's an infinity of universes. So we have no idea how many alternate or parallel universes could actually exist. And since we know that the multiverse means that there's a collection of different universes, have you ever thought that these different universes, do they have their own time spectrum? Because here in the universe right now, we're in the year of 2022 and we're going through quite a bit. The pandemic has happened, so many things have happened. But then maybe there is another universe with its own time spectrum where human civilization has not even been born yet. So, going off of this, do you think that time travel could actually be possible from this?
So, time travel, I'm going to use a movie that came out 40 years ago, roughly, as an example. So, the movie is Back to the Future. The plot is relatively simple to understand. So, we've got the protagonist. I think his name is Marty or something. I actually did watch it, but there's a protagonist called Marty. He meets a scientist who has this time traveling machine that can go back in time, right? And when he goes back in time, he kind of do some stuff and changes some things around. So, okay, let's backtrack a little bit. The protagonist, he has a family who are not so successful. His parents are not very good at their job, and his siblings are also not very successful as well. So after he goes back in time, he changes some things around, and now somehow when he comes back, his family is suddenly successful. It doesn't really make a lot of sense, and that's because that is not how, time travel is defined in the quote-unquote real life of theoretical physics. So a more possible thing, or like something that is more likely to happen, like if let's say I was the writer and I was to change a plot, to modify it to fit our current understanding of physics, it would turn into, so the protagonist starts in universe 1. So it is the starting universe. Let's say it was 1985 back in the movie. He jumps to the second universe, universe 2, which is 1955, which is around the time that his parents are really young, or like teenagers. And he changes something in Universe 2. And then instead of jumping back from Universe 2 to Universe 1, he jumps to Universe 3, which is the future of Universe 2. It doesn't really make a lot of sense because once he goes there, obviously there's going to be another version of him right there, and there's probably like an assassination movie in there somewhere. But it doesn't really work now that we actually think about it. So more problems will arise with we kind of make it too realistic. But in conclusion, if time travel was possible, it wouldn't be like in Back in the Future. It would be more like universe hopping from Universe 1 to Universe 2, and then change something in Universe 2, and then hop again to the third one. And I think this was mentioned in Endgame. So Endgame did a pretty good job of kind of interpreting what the multiverse is.
Yeah, that's very interesting. So now, do you think I can use time travel to go and see the dinosaurs? Sounds really interesting to me.
I think it's possible now that like I've heard somewhere from, I think it was like a video by Neil deGrasse Tyson, who said something along the lines of when the universe started, it kind of set like the rules of physics in place. Now, if you were to jump, let's say you jump to another universe that still has dinosaurs, the rules of physics over there might not be the same, and then maybe it's not even physics, maybe it's biology, maybe blood doesn't work the same way as our universe, and when we jump there and then our body doesn't really work there, and then we can't go back because we're dead.
Yeah, that's quite interesting, and I think that we could possibly link that to parallel universes. So as you were saying that we can jump between the universe, between the multiverse as a whole, the parallel universe kind of goes with the theory that we kind of have an infinite number of opposite lives. So here I am, I'm Tanisha, I'm the president of Science Society Club, I'm a biomedical student, but there could be a possibility that biologically I exist in another universe with a different persona, but I'm kind of me, and that is quite an interesting topic to me because we can lead that to deja vu. I'm pretty sure many of you listening to us today, and me, myself, and I think you too, Nawad, that we've had deja vu quite, I think, often. I sometimes am going about with my daily life and I'm like, why has this happened to me before? Or if something goes in class, I'm like, I've heard this joke before, but then it's never happened before. And I think it's a common occurrence for many of us. And sometimes it just kind of boggles your mind, like, oh, why? It's kind of like seeing into the future, but a very near future that you can predict yourself, which kind of like leads me to the question that if we did exist in a parallel universe, do you think we would be biologically different? If I were to jump from one universe to another and I would exist in a parallel universe, you think biologically I'd have to change as well to fit into that universe? Or would it be that I would exist as me in every universe that I travel to? And I think that because of this, the multiverse really is so expansive and there's so many ideas that we can talk about and further look into. And I think that makes it really interesting because there's so many things that are unanswered. But I definitely think that parallel universes are kind of like a mirror of our own reality. And I think reality as a concept of its own exists in every universe. There's one monotonous reality, but I feel like the multiverse kind of means that there are different versions of that reality. And you guys listening in, feel free to let us know what you guys think on this in the Google form that we attach. Let us know what you feel, so maybe we can kind of talk about this in more podcasts in the future as well.
Okay, so that was trippy. So to continue on the theme of trippiness, I would like to talk about how the internet. Oh my god, I'm so trippy. This is so trippy, I can't even speak anymore.
Welcome to the multiverse.
Oh no. Anyway, I want to talk a little bit about how the infinite universe work, or like the quote-unquote timeline branching. So in order to understand this, I have to teach you quantum physics. Now, okay, teach is a little bit is a exaggerated word. It's more like I'm just going to introduce you to some of the concepts of quantum physics and like physics in general. So if you're interested, you can go look it up yourself. I think we will have some kind of like interesting videos on YouTube that you can learn more about these stuff. But basically, here's a crash course on physics. And also, if there's any physics student listening in, I would like to say one thing. I'm so sorry for like simplifying the things that you spend like months studying about. This is from, I don't know, 2 hours before bed some day ago. Anyway, here's a quick lesson in quantum physics. In physics, there are two main ideas when we think about physics. We've got the classical physics, which is the ones that we learn in school, where if you know the initial, like let's say you throw a ball with a certain velocity, you will technically be able to determine where it's going to fall based on physics, right? And then there's quantum physics. This is different because it's probabilistic. So in classical physics, you are 100% sure that the ball is going to fall somewhere because you throw it with some kind of initial state. Now, in quantum physics, everything is about probability. Everything is described by the probability of something, of an object being in a certain place at a certain time. Now, here are some of the properties that I have to introduce to you to make you understand how the infinite universe works. There are obviously more properties, but let's try not to get too deep into the rabbit hole. I don't think we're ready to fit that into a 20-minute podcast.
Yeah.
So the properties, the first one is superposition. It basically says that objects can be anywhere at any time or be in any state until you measure it. So for example, let's say, so for the sake of this explanation, I'm going to sacrifice myself and turn myself into a quantum object, okay?
Wow.
I am now a quantum object. Let's say I have two very simple stages. I have when I put both of my hands up and I have both of my hands down. If I was in superposition, I would have both of my hands up and both of my hands down at the same time with varying probability. It doesn't really make sense. None of this makes sense, but stick with me.
What makes sense at this point? What is reality?
No, nothing. So the second property that we have to talk about is called decoherence. It basically says that once you observe a quantum object, it loses all of its quantum properties. So for example, let's say Tanisha is not a quantum object, and let's say you were looking at a wall somewhere. As long as she's not looking at me, I can be in superposition. I can be in this trippy state where I have both of my hands up and both of my hands down. But as soon as she turns around and she observes what I'm doing, she might be able to see that I have both of my hands up or both of my hands down. But that's with like 100% probability. Mm-hmm. And then the last one is entanglement. You may or may not have heard of this term before. I think it's been talked about in Ant-Man or something. It basically says that when two quantum objects interact, it gets entangled, and then from there on, when you measure something, like the state of the two objects are somehow correlated. The argument for the multiverse is that, let's say I'm a quantum object. I'm also human. What's stopping Tanisha from being another quantum object? Let's say Tanisha, because she's human, like me, hopefully.
Hopefully. Am I?
Oh no. Let's say she's another quantum object. So instead of when she turns around to observe me, she gets entangled, and now her actions are now correlated to the state of me. So if I have my hands up, you might say something like, why do you put your hands up? This is yeah, you might be confused, but if I put my hands down like a normal person, it's going to be different. And that's kind of where the branching happens. As soon as the two objects interact, so in this case, you turn around and you see what I'm doing, mm-hmm. That's where the branching kind of happens. And then from there on, we've got two branches. In one branch, mm-hmm. I put both of my hands up like a madman, and the other one, I'm a normal person. And this is kind of where the infinite universe works. Now, I know that Tanisha mentioned before in the parallel universe that there are kind of like infinite possibilities, but in this case, they are actually limited. It's still a very huge number, might as well be infinite, but it's still very small. Like, for example, let's say she looks away, right? She looks at, and then she turns around, she observes me. I'm not going to suddenly turn into a woman because my initial state is a man. If I were a woman, it would have, like, the branching would have happened back when I was born. Okay. So basically, everything has a probability in quantum physics, and because of those probability, we get like branching at various points in time. Basically, to sum it up, if there's a decision or like a quote unquote decision, if there are many outcomes of an event, that's kind of where the branching happens. Now that we've gone through the rabbit hole of quantum physics, I want to go back to my safe zone of pop culture. So let's talk about some of the movie endings of Captain America, the first Captain America movie, and maybe some other movie events. Do you want to bring any of them up? Do you have any theories about the endings of the current of like the movies?
Well, Captain America really makes me think sometimes, because if we were in a parallel universe and Captain America didn't go into that machine and become who he really was, but what if Peggy went in there? And I think most of you get my reference from the What If show in Disney Plus itself. I think that show is quite an interesting show that again kind of can relate to our podcast, because it kind of explores the multiverse related to Marvel. And I think that a lot of the multiverse does exist in Marvel, but now I think it exists in other movies too. Do you maybe have an idea of other movies?
I remember there's like a Japanese movie. It was called, the name is very confusing, but it was basically something along the lines of I will date you tomorrow tomorrow I will date you from yesterday. It's like a very confusing concept where basically there are two universes where the time runs differently. So the universe of the protagonist, the guy protagonist, let's say it goes right. The universe of the female protagonist goes left. And then there's like a point, maybe a month, where they somehow share the same universe. It's very trippy, but I think that's like another interpretation of the multiverse.
Yeah. And maybe it kind of gives a clue that universes could intersect, and that could cause, maybe that could kind of define soulmates if we believe in that. I know Valentine's Day is coming up. Some of us might give up on soulmates. Some of us might believe that we have a soulmate. But maybe that can kind of talk about soulmates, or like finding the person, kind of like your twin flame for those who like astrology. And I think the multiverse can actually be a basic explanation for quite a lot of things.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that is mostly the thing. Oh, we have one more thing. This is also like, let's just call it another question. Because I think I've brought this up before about how different universes can have different laws of physics. Do you think that there's a multiverse out there where magic is real?
Oh my God, that's very interesting. And if it is, I would love to be a part of that multiverse.
I would be scared, like people just suddenly snap their fingers and fire everywhere, but yeah.
Power.
Yes, exactly. Anyway, I think we can continue the discussion with the Google form and maybe Instagram stories. Just before we end the episode, I would like to say one thing is that we're not sponsored by Disney. Everything we talk about Marvel is out of our interest.
Yes. But Disney, if you want to sponsor us, we accept.
Okay. Well, so here's the last question of the podcast. What other movies do you think had some kind of multiverse logic in it? Please let us know in the Google form, and hopefully No, it's not going to be me. It might be someone else I don't know. It's
Yeah.
now our podcast is a multiverse now.
Yeah, who's next? What is the next podcast about? Think about it. And if you guys have any suggestions, improvement, topics you'd like to hear from our club in future podcasts, anything that interests you, even constructive criticism is welcome in the Google Forms. Feel free to share your thoughts. Feel free to help us on how we can improve, or if you would like us to add on something, or if you'd like the podcast to have us interacting with you on a live platform instead of pre-recorded, or if you'd like to see our beautiful faces instead of just listening to our voices. So do let us know your feedback, because it's everyone's feedback is welcome. Try to please be respectful of us as well, because we are trying our best as well. And yeah, we hope to see your feedback, and we hope you enjoy this podcast. Thank you guys.
All right. I hope this is a running tradition of our club, and hopefully we'll see you in 2 weeks or something like that. I don't remember the schedule. Anyway, see you guys. Bye bye.